This time last year, I asked myself, can I go stashless in 2020? Well, it's been quite a journey and many of you guys have come along with me. 12 months later, this is everything that I have learned along the way. The classic knitting mug. Hello and welcome to the Crimson Stitchery, a video channel about making all things beautiful and useful. My name is Anushka and you can find all relevant links, things mentioned in this video, in the down bar here on YouTube. Just before I get into chatting about my stashless journey, I want to make a quick announcement, which is that this Friday, the 8th of January, I will be hosting a live stream conversation with Diana Waller, who is Paper Tiger Knits, all about the design collaboration that we have been doing over the last autumn and winter. I shared the finished designs for my Brandy Butter Hat and my Ginger Snaps mitten during Vlogmas, and there's a link on screen now for that video if you didn't manage to catch it back in December. So please do join us on the 8th, which will be at 6:30 in the evening, Greenwich Mean Time, London time. So please check your relevant time zone. And yeah, it will be a great opportunity to learn more about the collaboration, ask us questions live, and it will just be really lovely to have you guys along with us, whether drinking a cup of tea or maybe something a little bit stronger. I will put a link to access that live video streaming also in the description box here on YouTube, where you will be able to set a reminder, a notification, so that you don't miss out. But if for any reason you aren't able to make it on the day, or if you're watching this video further along in the future, it will be recorded too, so you'll be able to catch up. So, Stashless 2020, let's get into it with a quick recap for anyone that is new to the channel. Basically, as I was tidying up at the end of last year, I realised that whilst I'd managed to knit 6 sweaters during 2019, I actually had another 6 or more quantities of yarn in my stash, which I could use to make a whole bunch more sweaters without actually needing to buy anything new. And this felt a little bit shocking to me because I honestly didn't know how I'd managed to get to that stage. So my aim for my stashless year was to use what I had much more and try my best not to buy anything new. And it became a really wonderful community endeavor. There was a hashtag on Instagram, there were comments on my YouTube videos as I vlogged throughout the year about the projects that I was doing. And there was also a really wonderful chatter thread that was really active in our Ravelry group. And the whole thing about Stashless 2020 was that you could join in at any point. So even if it was September, I had people finding my video channel much later in the year and they wanted to take part and they were really inspired to do so. And if this is you, if you're fairly new to the channel, keep watching to the end. So my plan for my Stashless 2020 was basically to tidy up, to get a better handle on my stash and a better idea of what I really had, and to make much more with what I already had, predominantly the yarns that I had, but also the patterns and the many knitting books and so on that I've got here at home. I also wanted to just complete old projects and sort of see old plans through and deal with it in that sense throughout the year, rather than kind of continuing to put them off in favour of brand new cast-ons with brand new yarn and the sort of the latest thing that kept coming up as it always does. And that's something that I'll be talking about much more in this video. I did have a few exceptions to these rules. I decided that I was allowed to acquire new to me yarn if it was a gift, and I really wanted to do more gift knitting throughout 2020, and that is something that I did manage to do, which has been really wonderful and on the whole a very positive experience. Although I did also make a video recently that explores when and if and how it is appropriate to do gift knitting and gift crafting in general, including crochet, sewing, whatever it is. So do check out that video if that piques your interest. I also decided to make some exceptions for design work because I was planning to do much more designing of my own original hand knitting patterns throughout 2020. And I would say that making design samples is definitely what grew my stash the most overall. And doing design work was certainly the thing that probably caused me to fail at my original plan of being stashless, but actually I didn't mind this at all. I was more than happy with the development, and I've been so just amazed and heartened to see the response that you guys have also had to my design work, and there are links to that to my online shops down below if you want to check that out a little bit more. Overall, my plan was to knit much more from my stash than I brought into it. So including kind of buying for gifts and, acquiring things for designs. Overall, I just wanted to knit much more from my stash. And I very roughly thought that I could try and stick to an idea of 2 out before I could have one in. And I think, again, overall, I have been successful of that, rather than going complete cold turkey and sort of risking like a rebounding kind of thing, you know, being too strict and too unrealistic and kind of punishing myself. I wanted to see this as a creative and affirmative exercise to reassess the relationship that I had with my own crafting materials. And again, that is something that I think has gone really, really well. And that's something that other members of the community of the Crimson Stitchery over on Ravelry, over on Instagram, you know, that's the thing that people have commented on the most, because my Stashless year was not about a shopping ban, and it wasn't about, it wasn't about throwing things away and kind of clearing out. It was really about really interrogating and understanding the relationship that we have to materials in our own lives, with our own, you know, particular set of circumstances, our own backgrounds and histories, our own relationships to things like hoarding and acquiring and shopping. It's a really, really emotive subject, and one that is just deeply personal. And the Stashless year was a chance to really dig deep into that and uncover what we really, really wanted, and just try to kind of unpick all of the messages that we are constantly being bombarded with regarding buying new things and kind of doing the latest thing and all of that business. So without further ado, here are the top lessons that I learned from my Stashless year. Number one is that you need to want to do this actively. You need to actually want to participate in the Stashless year. And I think it is important to commit to it for the full year, or at least try to, you know, over a long period of time, because it's more realistic, because things are going to happen and things are going to change, and you're going to forget about Stashless and you're going to slip up and, you know, just whatever. And that is totally fine. But I think the whole benefit of the Stashless year was to have that long-term period of reflection where you could make comparisons about your behavior, and you need to keep reminding yourself about it. You need to keep reminding yourself why exactly you wanted to participate in the Stashless year endeavour. I think that we really, really saw this in our Ravelry chatter group, where a small group of people were very, very active, warm and encouraging towards all members. You know, it's normal to have people who kind of hang back a bit and read. I myself am a bit of a lurker when it comes to participating in online communities, but there are the real stalwart, amazing members of the group who are very, very active and just so encouraging. And yeah, we saw this quite a lot at the beginning of the pandemic, when there was this big panic, there was a lot of uncertainty, and there was a lot of tendencies to kind of revert to behaviour that we thought might kind of feel comforting, which includes, you know, buying new things, distracting ourselves with, you know, beautiful and shiny and exciting latest things, because everything in the world was just so challenging in so many ways. You know, I'm struggling to even articulate it clearly, but I'm sure you know exactly what I mean. And not only that, there was a big uncertainty about the economy and what the repercussions of that would have on small businesses, because, you know, many crafts businesses, local yarn shops, knitting designers like me, people that create media and content for you guys to enjoy, we're all small businesses. And I think there was definitely the feeling that if you had the means to kind of help out by engaging with the community in a financial manner, then you should. And I really do applaud that. I think it is pretty generous. But I think at the end of the day, you have to kind of weigh things up and decide how that sits with you. And does that actually mean you should go out and buy more things, or are there other ways to contribute, even other financial manners to contribute? So I think that was a really, really big testing time for many people. And that was when a lot of people kind of fell off the wagon, and myself included. That's actually when I placed large orders of yarn, which was kind of for my gift knitting that I've mentioned, because I wanted to, you know, make sure that my local yarn shop had that bit of extra income. So I basically brought like a delayed purchase forward in that moment, because they really needed the cash flow essentially. But I just want to highlight that, because I bought stuff that I was already planning on buying, rather than kind of willy-nilly, just kind of impulse buying. But I'm not an impulse buying person, which is why, you know, when I say you have to really want to do it, it's that you have to have your own reasons, really examine what they are and why it is that you think that going on this Stashless journey is worth it for you, and why it is exactly that you want to participate. Lesson number 2, scraps and leftovers really add up. It's kind of overwhelming, and you can see how I reacted to this in my video where I tidied up my stash, i.e. rolled around on the floor covered in it. But scraps and leftovers really add up, and they were quite a large part of my stash, kind of in volume. You can really physically see it. As part of that, I think it's so helpful to keep a kind of rotating library of scrap projects at the back of your mind, things that can be really, really effective and gorgeous, and that might actually use scrap yarns in unusual ways. In fact, the jumper that I'm wearing is my Caterpillar scrap jumper, which is a design inspired by Kay Fassett, who's, you know, he's a designer who was really active in the 80s. Like, some of his stuff is a little bit dated, but he really does have an amazing way of painting with yarns and painting with kind of solid coloured yarns. You know, it's not so much the like semi-solid hand-dyed yarns that we're a bit more used to seeing people be kind of push the boundaries with today. But, you know, he really created all of those effects by hand, by kind of combining like different stripes and so on and so forth. Anyway, just having different designers, different people, different moments in your mind, different projects is so handy, because it all just adds up. I think it's also really handy keeping some kind of large, long-term scrap blanket project going. At the moment, sitting next to me, I've got a log cabin blanket, which I have shared a little bit in my vlogs, in my show and tell vlogs recently. And this is unfinished. It's just over halfway through. And you can see like the volume, it's a whole bag. And then I've got another 2 bags of scraps here. And I'm hoping to, only have 1 bag's worth left over at the end, but it's huge amount of yarn. And also here sitting next to me is just a random selection of other projects that I made either during my Stashless year or actually before, where I used what I had on hand. So it's really good just to kind of keep tabs on what you've got, because the scraps, the leftover balls, the little bit extra that you needed when you needed to finish a sweater, but you only used like 10 meters and you've got another 200 meters left, all of that kind of thing just mounts up so quickly. Point number 3 that has been one of the most challenging things to grapple with is that your opinions will change. Your opinions about what you like, what you enjoy making, and what you enjoy doing are going to change. And also just your situation in your life, that is all going to constantly be in flux. And this was one of the things that really came to light when I was confronting my possessions, my stash, because I just kept finding old plans, old decisions, things that I was no longer into. I think this comes down to the sunk costs fallacy, which is that if you've invested a lot of money in something, or a lot of time as well, it can be really, really difficult to kind of step away from that. You feel like because you've spent a lot of money on something, you have to see it through no matter what. Even if actually you're not enjoying it and that's why you haven't finished a project or you haven't touched a set of yarns, it can be really, really difficult to let go, especially if you hate waste, which is something that I've brought up on this channel quite a lot. If you hate the idea of things, kind of money being wasted or ideas being wasted or whatever. But at the end of the day, we have to live in the present. We just have to, because that's what we do. Maybe that's a little bit of my, my Buddhist family background kind of coming through, but we do live in the present, and that's where we have to be. We have to accept that things change and we might feel differently about something now than we did like 10 or 15 years ago when we originally bought a skein of yarn. And just make a reassessment and decide what it is that you want to hang on to. You need to really weigh up how you want to be spending your time and what kind of feelings you want to be engaging with, what kind of feelings you want to have when you look at your possessions, when you look at your stuff, when you look at your stash. If you are feeling, oh, I love all of this stuff, I'm actually really happy to have it here and it's working for me, then whatever, then great. But actually, if when you're looking at all of your possessions, what you feel is a burden and, negativity or guilt or, whatever it is, then I think it's really important to address that. And I think that the Stashless year really is a wonderful tool in order to engage with that. Number 4, the most delightful lesson that I learned is that having boundaries really pushes your creativity. It really does. This is something that you'll hear a lot of creatives talk about. And you'll hear people talking about that a lot when they're talking about kind of boosting your creativity and learning new skills and kind of trying to open up new ideas and so on. So I was used to the idea, but what was a big surprise to me was that actually this concept of having boundaries, pushing your creativity, can and should also be applied in a more direct manner and in just even in a technical sense. So what I mean by that is that when I decided that I wasn't allowed to buy any new yarn and I had all this yarn and I needed to find things for it, I started doing things in new and unexpected ways that just opened up, you know, the limitations that I might previously have put on myself. Like, oh, I don't have the right weight yarn, I don't have the right colour yarn, I don't have enough yarn for this. And you just find different ways of doing things. So I think a good example of that is this fluorescent yellow cycling hat. It's got like a reflective thread inside it, and I knew that I didn't have enough yarn on its own just to make a fingering weight hat, so I combined it with, I think it was actually 3 strands of yarn in total, so it was knit at a larger gauge and it went a bit further, and I was able to knit this little beanie which in the end I wear nearly every day and certainly every time that I go out on my bicycle. Also things like this little pair of fingerless gloves. I actually made this before the Stashless year, but I combined all sorts of different yarns in the colour work because I didn't have Shetland type yarns, you know, I didn't have the same woolen spun yarns for all of the different colours that I would have needed. So I just used some really slippery sock yarn and found a way to make it work. And the biggest thing that taught me that lesson was this eclectic jumper, which I've talked about a lot on this channel, and loads of people are a big fan of this crochet jumper, because I discovered that in crochet you can actually combine different weights of yarn really nicely and produce a lovely coherent finished fabric with different weights, different thicknesses of yarn and different fibres too, and it looks fabulous, and it's kind of comes together a bit more than it does in knitting. Yet actually with this jumper that I'm wearing, I also combined different weights of yarn and different fibres, and it worked too. I also created this crochet jumper, which was just wonderful because it was the first crochet garment I've ever did, and I overcame that block of being afraid of doing crochet garments. When you impose these boundaries upon your making practices, it forces you to engage with a new type of problem solving, which you would never have done before. So it's totally engaging all of your cognitive skills as well. And it's just not the same as kind of dismissing what you might already have at home and just saying, oh, I'm just going to go and buy the exact yarn and the, you know, that is said in the pattern and just follow everything that's already been laid out for me because I don't have it. Actually, I think if you start trying to think outside the box and think in different ways about your making projects with the restraint of the materials that you have on hand, whatever those restraints are, whatever those materials are, like I said, it's very individual, then you will just be opening up different avenues in your mind, neuroplasticity. And on that note, the 5th biggest lesson that I learned from my Stashless year is that the Stashless year was a huge mindset shift. And that was really, really wonderful to discover, something that I so enjoyed because it was about unraveling all of the different habits that sort of just accumulated in a kind of inactive way, like not on purpose, and then making decisions about how I wanted things to go, and then just going down that path, being open to see what happened as well. Overall, I learned that what I already had could go so much further than I thought. I learned that even if I had a small amount of yarn of something, I could combine it in new ways, I could create different types of projects, and I could just use the resources that I already had without spending more money because I'm always on a tight budget being a student. And also just kind of respecting the resources that had already been spent in producing the yarns and the patterns and so on that I already did have. Through this mindset shift, I also noticed something, which was that when I did buy new yarn, like for the sweaters and so on that I did as gifts, I tended to cast on with that new yarn almost immediately, knit the thing, finish the thing, be delighted with the thing. Whereas what was bugging me was having all of these old projects and old sweater quantities hanging around. And I think that kind of harnessing that sense of newness and excitement can be really, really beneficial, and is actually something that I'm going to be thinking about much more in the year forward. Because I think it's so great to commit to that excitement and that energy and just see the thing through, finish the project, you know, deal with the yarn rather than having more stuff kind of hanging around. So my question to you is, did you join in with the Stashless year in 2020? Or is this something that you are planning and hoping to do in 2021? Let me know in the comments down below. What did you learn, or what would you hope for by going Stashless? And also let me know if there are any other things you'd like me to talk about concerning my Stashless year. If you've enjoyed this video, please do give me a thumbs up down below and hit subscribe if you haven't done so already to the Crimson Stitchery, which is a video channel containing vlogs, tutorials, tips, tutorials, other videos like this, and just generally lots of different things for you to enjoy. I just have a last quick note for my wonderful audience, you guys, which is about the kind of announcement and thoughts that I made in the last week's video about Patreon. Thanks so much to everybody who reached out, dropped me a comment, sent me an email or a message saying that you would be willing to support the Crimson Stitchery over on Patreon. I was really overwhelmed by your response, by your positivity. I don't know why it came as such a surprise, but your messages were just absolutely wonderful and so meaningful to me. And I really, really thank you. I'm going to be going ahead with Patreon. I'm in the process of setting it up. It takes a few weeks to get going. And of course, I will let you know when that is ready to go. But you'll hear about it first through my newsletter. So please do subscribe to my newsletter if you haven't done so already. Postcards from the Crimson Stitchery. It normally comes out once a month with just little tidbits and glimpses behind the scenes. So newsletter is a great place to go in general. I also want to thank everybody who has donated to the Crimson Stitchery by buying me a coffee on Ko-fi, and everyone who has downloaded one of my original knitting patterns. Thank you so much. Your support really, really means a lot to me. I'm also really grateful for everybody who has engaged with my videos here on YouTube, who has liked, commented, subscribed, spread the word for everyone who has told people about the Crimson Stitchery and shared it on your Instagram stories and everything else. You guys have been here cheering me along this whole time, growing the Crimson Stitchery to 11,000 subscribers now, which is honestly something that I never dreamed that I would have. And almost one of the best things about this has been the community that has grown up alongside it on YouTube, on Instagram, on Ravelry. So a big thank you, because it means so much and I honestly couldn't do it without you. I just want to address quickly why it is that I've decided to go towards Patreon, because I had a few kind of questions and things that came up in the comments of the last video. So a big reason for me joining Patreon is that through the monthly subscriptions, I'm able to have a predictable income so that I can cover all of the considerable running costs for producing videos and producing knitting patterns as well, and so that I can budget adequately for equipment upgrades. Basically, I've got as far as I have using existing equipment and using free software. Along the way through Ko-fi, I've managed to purchase a few other pieces of equipment which have been so helpful, but it's not predictable. And so through Patreon, it also makes it easier for supporters, because you don't have to go in there every time and, do the transaction. And the main thing, Patreon allows me to create bonus content and extra rewards for people who want to subscribe. I totally get that it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I hope that you can understand that going forward it's something that the Crimson Stitchery is really, really going to benefit from. So I will still be producing content for YouTube, but people who subscribe to Patreon will be getting a lot of extras, a lot more behind the scenes content, access to my knitting patterns as well as part of some of the tier subscriptions, and just generally a place to bring the community together actively to talk about and work on the things that we are very, very passionate about. So thank you to everybody who has been in touch asking about that, and watch this space and subscribe to the newsletter for a more immediate update about Patreon. That's everything from me today. I hope that you've enjoyed watching. Don't forget to drop me a comment letting me know what you think about the Stashless year, and I'll put the information about hashtags and everything else down below in the description box too. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.